I'm Pam, a mother, runner, business owner, and the host of the I Work For Me podcast. This podcast shares stories from the world of entrepreneurship because starting a business doesn't have to feel like a far-off dream, and running one shouldn't feel like a nightmare. Good morning. Author, coach, and behavioral agitator. And in her own words, why would I want to be a cut and paste version of someone else when there's the discovery of me, even if that comes with a bruised ego? Juanene Frydman, thank you for joining me at I Work For Me.
It's gorgeous to be here, Pam, and so good to come, I kind of want to say full circle.
Yes, it has been. It's been a couple of years, hasn't it? I was thinking about it the other day as well. It's been 9 years.
Get out of here, really?
Yep.
Okay, well, I feel like there have been a whole
Sorry,
lot of
did that make you
circles.
feel old?
It's like all of a sudden, oh, thank God it's a wet gelled look today. You can't see my grey.
Nothing wrong with grey. It makes you look dapper and silver foxish. I love it.
There we go. There we go.
Juanene, thank you for joining us. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. I know a whole lot about you. However, we obviously want to share with our audience.
Right.
How did you start? Where did you start in this big world of employment? And what did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Oh, that is just, I kind of want to say so easy for me to answer, right? And I'm going to say, I can remember, so I was the first grandchild and firstborn child. And I'm talking about 1965, way back then when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So my parents shipped me off to my paternal grandparents who lived on a farm. And obviously they had to do whatever you did tending a farm in those days. So I was pretty much left on my own. And I had these two imaginary friends who were with me from as long as I can remember, so kind of 4-ish, until I was about 10 or 11. And their names were Guleman and Jurlis. Now, don't ask me where I came up from those names because I have no idea. But Guleman and Jurlis were my mates. And I would talk to them nonstop. I mean, it got to the point where I was setting up a place setting for them at the dinner table. And my nonno, being a very good Italian Catholic man, thought that I was deranged, right? Because I would be talking to these people next to me, but there was nobody there. And then the minute I had two sisters, it was just heaven on earth. Because now I actually had humans who I could teach. And I think I must have been about 12, and I overheard my youngest, or my baby brother, right? He was 3 at the time, complaining to my mom about how strict I was and how he didn't want to go to school because I used to line them up and teach them. I couldn't wait to come home from school to pass on this knowledge. Didn't matter that they didn't want to hear. They had to hear. And my mom turned around and said to him, she is such a sergeant major. We all know that. And, you know, even to today, my siblings call me the sergeant major. But I guess teaching came from a place of not having anybody to engage with as a kid. I was on the farm on my own and engaging with these. And I remember clearly they were adults, right? These two imaginary friends. And just having to teach, to engage, to share with whatever was happening in my life. So I always wanted to be a teacher. Always, always.
And then what subject, I have to ask you, what subjects did you teach? Because
what
was it just an oh, well, I have to teach you, or was it specific?
So I was that geek who did Latin up until matric, right? So I would teach from my Latin textbooks. And I loved Latin. I adored Latin. So I would do that, and then I would my late dad loved reading. So he was the person who would take an Encyclopedia Britannica to the bathroom, right? And come out like 2 hours later, filled with this knowledge. So I would take one of these heavy bound, red leather bound books, and I would read. And then I would ask them questions. And heaven forbid they couldn't answer, because then they failed.
But did you read to them, or did you just read?
So I read to my siblings, and I read anything and everything. I mean, this is back in the days when, right? So, and libraries kind of existed, but I read everything from the age of 6 that I could get my hands on. You know, the Nancy Drews, the Famous Five, the Secret Sevens, I suppose the precursors to the Harry Potters, right? And literally devoured anything and everything. So it wasn't a specific genre, but just reading, just learning.
I love that. And do you know how today, just in general, I get so frustrated that children don't read. And my number one thing is to teach my kids to read. They have, and not just to be able to put words together, but to lose themselves in stories. Because, and you being the storyteller that you are, because I do know that that's one of the big things that you really, really say. Whether you believe it yet or not, each of us are natural born storytellers. It's for this reason that storytelling underpins all that I do. And that just leads back to your origins, if we can put it that way.
Absolutely.
I think it's fantastic. I really do. I think it's wonderful. So, and then where to from there? So now, are you a teacher? Is that where you went to?
So I think I'm a teacher of self, first and foremost, right? So it's a bit of a contradiction in that I love learning. I really and truly do. I mean, if you had to take a squiz at my bookcase, you would have everything from how to cast a spell, and I shit you not, to to something in quantum physics, or to beading and crafting, to how our body holds memory, right? So there's everything and anything and everything. But, or rather, and I love the space of learning first and foremost about me, because, there's that adage of wherever I go, there I am. So the more I learn of myself, I can, and I use the word carefully, teach, but make available to other people. Well, this is what I have learned, and I think it might be able to help you. Or this is what I have learned. Here's a book, or here's an article. Have a squiz at it, read it, see it might land for you. And I suppose the space of teaching is affording people in my space information, and then making the invitation to them, whether they pick up any of that or not. And I think that's really and truly how I see teaching. It's not about being a force-fed goose any longer, but it's just, here is this plethora of information. And some of it I know, some of it I have heard a distant story about, but here it is. Take it up.
I love the way you say that it's an invitation to, because you've obviously experienced the information and you've assimilated it in some form or another, and then to be able to share it with people. Because I'm exactly the same as you. I love learning and I love reading, and every opportunity I get. And then this is obviously, so you've taken the books, you give it to your opportunity, and that's obviously why you went into coaching.
So I think coaching was a bit of I find myself, really.
Okay.
So I was in the corporate world and thought that I was a whole lot more important than I really was. So I was coup, and because of my personality type and my enneagram type, I just loved structuring other people's lives and doing everything as perfectly as possible. Along the way, as great as corporate was for me, and I will always hold that to be true on multiple levels, it was absolutely flippin' fantastic. And I sold my soul. I became the proverbial, well, corporate prostitute. I got an incredible salary every month. I had all of the, I call them now the trappings. A lot of people call them the trimmings. And I lost who I was. Yes, I truly lost who I was. So I would give myself a get out of jail free card because I was not a present mother. And I would excuse that by saying, yes, but I'm bringing home the bacon, which is quite funny given that we're in a Jewish family. But anyway, I was bringing home the bacon, right? And the contract was with my now ex-husband, you be the mom, I'll be the parent. And that worked. It really and truly did. And then one day I just woke up and I actually didn't know what made me happy or what made me sad, what made me angry, what made me fearful, what brought me joy. I had no idea anymore. And it was then that I decided I needed to step out of this corporate jail that I had created for myself.
Why did you get to that question of you had no idea how you felt? Obviously something must have happened that kind of gave you a wake-up call and said,
yes,
chick, you don't know what you're feeling.
Absolutely.
What was it?
So no different to now. I absolutely adore having dinner parties, right? I mean, my dinner parties, or I call it my dinner table, with a dinner table, lunch table. It's quite legendary, right? The conversations and the people at my table, I don't know, it's kind of a magic table as to what happens around that table. So I was having a dinner party and my CEO happened to be there. And in his state, he passed a comment to everybody at the dinner table as to how he found it quite amusing that I, Juanene, had sold my soul to the devil. And that was him.
He was the devil.
He was the devil. And context, again, he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I gave the permission for it. So he would feel nothing to phone me. And I mean, I'm talking days before mobile phones. I mean, good old fashioned landline, right? He would phone at 2 o'clock in the morning to ask what a certain share had closed at and how much money he had made from, a month ago or the day before, or would phone. And one of his favorite party tricks was, because I have a really good memory for numbers, he would say, tell me what my ID number is. Or tell me what my passport number is, right? So, but I mean, I allowed it because I never said enough. I never drew that line because I was so hooked into the overseas travel and the company credit card and the great salary, and I gave that permission to him.
And don't we all make excuses as well? Oh, well, I can deal with that because, and I can deal with that because, and if I want to achieve this, I need to deal with that. And it makes you realize how important your self-worth is.
Absolutely. And I think in that process, when I heard that, as it was that proverbial cold shower, right? Because he was right. I had given him absolute control over who I was. I had allowed that relationship to get to that stage. And it was at that dinner party, after it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and Philippe and I were stacking the dishwasher, and I said to him, I'm done. I'm out. And he
Wow.
said to me, and what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And I remember there wasn't a sense of fear. There was just, I can't want to say there was nothingness, Pam. And that's when I thought, well, shouldn't I be worried? Shouldn't I be ecstatic or happy? But there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And 6 months later, I resigned. And
so you gave yourself 6 months at least.
yes, yes.
And in those 6 months, did you kind of work through stuff, or did you just kind of go, I'll do this in 6 months' time?
No. So I started in true me style, started looking for what I thought I might be able to do in the world in a new iteration. So I started looking at, what do I love doing? If I could, what would be the perfect job, the perfect role? And through this and conversations with incredible mentors in my life at the time, the one suggested this thing called coaching. I always remember saying to him, I really don't like sport. Anybody who knows me knows I don't do sport. He looked at me and he went, no, Juanene, it's got nothing to do with sport. So I said, oh, okay, well then what is it? And here was this gentleman explaining this thing called coaching to me. To my absolute delight, it had nothing to do with sport. So I engaged a coach. And at that time, she lived in Europe. And I had no idea what this was going to look like, feel like, be like. I mean, we used to do it on Skype.
Oh, okay.
Skype on a very erratic line. Sometimes the line was so static, I wouldn't be able to hear, and then we'd do Skype chat. And I think it must have been about the third or the fourth conversation. She asked a question, and I just remember bawling my heart out. And once I pieced myself together, I kind of thought that was just one question that was, just one domino insight after the other. And from then to the end of our coaching, I asked her to work with me around what would it look like, be like, feel like for me to do this thing called coaching. And that's when I just dived into whatever was available in South Africa at the moment. And did, I think, back in the day, David Rock's results coaching, and did coactive coaching. And then in 2005, flew to the UK to get accredited into a next coaching thing, and then literally announced it to my network and said, well, this is me.
Wonderful.
If you're brave enough, would you allow me to work with you? And that was, as they say, history. That was the start of history.
And it started you working for you.
Yes, absolutely.
That is absolutely wonderful. And where have you gone from there? So now I know that you've developed a whole lot of programs and all that kind of thing that is specific. And from being the newbie learning about it to now going and developing your own programs. Tell me.
So I think it's a bit like all of us, right? So learning around what resonates with us, learning around really and truly what lights your fire, right? So there are a couple of things that over time I have learned that get me moving, get me to a place of excitement. And archetypal patterning, and I spoke about being the proverbial prostitute, right? So archetypal patterning is inherent to all of us. And I love that, because the minute that we can see an archetype in our own lives, we at least become aware of it. And then it doesn't manage us we have a greater sense of power over that pattern. So archetypal patterning is something that I absolutely adore. Ontology, and as one client said, oncology, I don't have any disease. And I went, no, not oncology, ontology. And ontology is just simply the interplay of our behaviors, our moods and emotions, and our language, so language is thought, and then the enneagram. So I have designed, I suppose, a coaching model, if you will, that allows people to become aware of who they are being, which speaks to, so what is the language that I use relative to myself? Because we all kind of have a go-to vocabulary based on our enneatype. And how does that then show up in your behavior? And what kind of moods and emotions do you have?
So your enneatype kind of determines the language you use, which then determines the way that you behave in certain situations.
Correct. Okay. So I'll use myself as an example, right?
Hence the stories.
So, yes. So, hence the stories we tell, yes. So in my book, I have taken the traditional Enneagram type and to some degree made it my own. So where the traditional Ennea 1 is known as the reformer or the strict perfectionist, I have created two animals for that archetype, one being the ant, when the Enneagram is in its healthiest iteration, and the bee when it's in its unhealthy iteration.
Okay.
So the ant is very structured, very orderly, gets things done. There's a right way, there's a wrong way, there's a black or white, right, wrong, good, bad, up, down, very, duality oriented. And the bee is the sting. It's the scathing tongue. It's the beheading with sarcasm, right? It's the intense critic of others. So I am the ant and I am the bee. So traditionally, I am the one on the Enneagram. So the range of language often with my Enneatype, the one, is I should, I must, I need to, I have to. And it's a lot of restrictive languaging. With that comes
box.
Correct. And then, the physical impact of that is that a lot of ones suffer from really bad shoulder ache and jaw ache because you're constantly clenching down on what you think you want to say, but you shouldn't say it because it's not the right thing to say. So there's a lot of rigidity in our bodies.
So as an ant, you want to be a bee, but you don't be the bee because being an ant is better.
Correct. And at the same time, catching myself when I'm so scathing. I remember when I was in corporate, so many a time, I would have men literally gasp at my language. And I saw that as quite an achievement. But I would literally behead. Because from that very unaware perspective, the bee is just so stinging because they are so critical. Now, I do that to myself unconsciously, right? So when I can bring this to the awareness of a client, to a group of people that I'm coaching, to a team that I'm working with, when this person acts in this way, and most importantly, you understand their Enneatype, because it's really, it's not the behavior that you see, it's obviously the why they behave in that manner. And my particular Enneatype is the core story of not being good enough. So the not being good enough presents in the world as trying as hard as possible to be the most perfect version of myself that I can possibly be, which already sets me up for failure.
So much. I can feel that mantle already sitting on my
Correct. So that is the place that I love working with my clients, becoming aware of their inner story.
But then figuring it out, because obviously you have a conversation with them and several conversations with them.
Yes.
Do you work specifically with corporates and teams? Do you work with entrepreneurs? I'm just trying to understand, because now I'm looking at it from my point of view. How could you help me, sort of thing?
Yes. So I kind of want to say, and the Americanized way, Americans love having a niche. The first time I understood a niche, it was like, why can't you say that word properly? There comes my one enneagram type, right? So a niche or a niche. Over almost 2 decades now of coaching, the bulk of my client base is female, right? And somewhere between the ages of 38 and 49, whether those are incredible women CEOs, incredible women in teams, incredible women such as yourself who are multi-business oriented entrepreneurs, it really and truly isn't one space that I work with, right? It is just so happens that I tend to work with more women than I do with gentlemen. And I guess the starting point is, and I always say, let's have a coffee, because I'm a coffee addict. So let's have a coffee, let's have a chat. And that moves into a coaching engagement as to how I might support you as Pam would be to look to what is your story? Where did that story come from? And I'm not saying that I'm a psychotherapist or a psychoanalyst or anything like that, but using the basis of the Enneagram, how do we determine your core inner story?
And
then
what my story is, and how I tell that story, and how I enact that story, and how
Correct.
I manifest that story into my everyday life.
Absolutely. And that is the key, right? We can choose to be unconscious to what we are manifesting, or conscious to what we are manifesting.
I love that. I really do. I had a conversation with both my kids, or my little ones, on a regular basis, and they have hissy fits and they cry, and this is unfair and that's unfair. And I'm going, but you feeling the way you feel, whose fault is that? The fact that the incident happened is irrelevant. It's how you feel that is 100% your responsibility. And it's creating that awareness. So I get it, 100%. I don't know if I get it. No, I'm hoping they get it. I don't know if I get it.
So, you speak about 100% your responsibility. I was listening to, was watching a video the other day on somebody who's just come into my awareness, somebody who's been around a very long time, a guru known as Sadhguru. And he was speaking about his interpretation of the concept responsibility. And in very simplistic terms, he announced it to be the ability to respond.
Yes.
And that is, for me, how, when working with a client, how do I bring them to a place of consciousness to their language, to their emotions, to their behaviors? And then the ability to respond differently.
Is that an innate way of behaving, or do you train yourself no matter what? Because I think about it, I mean, obviously children, when they're born, they behave in a certain way based 100% on what's happening in their environment.
For
And
sure.
they were taught that it doesn't matter what's happening in your environment, you need to behave a certain way. And now you're telling me that we have a choice on how we behave.
Yes. Yes.
People don't make it easy.
So if you think, no, we don't, right? Because we have these goddamn rules and regulations that to a large degree box us. And that is why I so love the model, and I'm biased, right? Disclaimer. I so love the model that I have designed because it says to you, this is the box that you have lived in, that you've operated in.
Mhm.
Now, if you can imagine that that box was a good old-fashioned cardboard box, let's start flattening the sides. Let's create this space for you to step out of that containment and actually start living who you are to the fullest degree of who you are. So, if you think about a child, and I often use this analogy when I'm coaching a client, children will have a tantrum because they don't necessarily have the wherewithal, the knowledge, the language to articulate, this is how I am feeling. That they would sometimes feel unsafe or not secure. And their tantrum is simply a way to bring to the adult's attention, something is out of kilter in my space. Now, when I'm a 55-year-old having a tantrum, it is to a large degree that smaller part of me that still feels unsafe, that still doesn't necessarily have the terminology, the vocab, the bandwidth to be able to express how I am feeling.
And it's that inner child, as you say,
Yep,
that
absolutely.
goes, who is throwing the temper tantrum, and
Yes,
we're having
yes,
to assess it
correct.
and then express it that makes it okay to the rest of the world.
Correct.
But if you don't understand it, how are you going to ever express it?
Well, this is the whole thing. So if you don't understand it, you continue leaving relationships because they don't work for you without you taking cognizance of your impact on the relationship. Or you leave a job because, that role doesn't support you anymore. So we have little mini tantrums all the time, right? I mean, please, I don't walk on water by any form, right? So I constantly have tantrums. The benefit is that to some degree, I can almost see it coming. So I'm allowed, I give myself that rein it back in, Juanene, or as I've gone into a state of unconsciousness, so to speak, and I recognize what I have done, I have the ability to apologize, to take ownership, to rectify, to learn, to, and it is that whole thing. It's about unlearning to relearn, unlearn, relearn, unlearn, relearn, all day, every day.
Wow. And then how does this all lead into your entrepreneurial journey? Because it must do. I mean, it must have such a huge impact on where do you go to from here? Because now you're a coach, you've done the enneagram thing. Now what's happening?
So, last year was a shocker of a year for me. And I have to be really real about that, right? So my own particular enneagram type literally took over my brain. And I just noticed how the world stopped for me. I got so consumed by this external viewing of everybody else. And I'm going to use your name as an example, right? I looked at Pam. Oh, my word, Pam had pivoted. Oh, and I looked at Jack. Oh, Jack has pivoted. Everybody was pivoting around me. And the more that people were changing, coming up with new business ideas, the more I was drowning. And I just didn't know. And again, based on my enneatype and my personality type, the louder that noise became about, come on, Juanene, get up, do something, the louder the projection of the disparity of where I was and where they were became, the more pronounced it became, which meant the less I did. So can I tell you what happened in my life in 2020? Other than putting on 15 kilos? I actually can't. I became completely consumed by my own noise of not good enoughness. And it was a shocker of a year. And it was towards the end of last year where, can I tell you what happened? No, there wasn't a big, like, you know, the cloud opening and the rays coming down from.
No one telling you that you sold your soul.
No, you know, there was no big aha and waking, and, you know, it was literally one day I woke up and it was a case of, today, if I do not change my state today, I will die. Not maybe physically, but mentally and emotionally, I will die.
Well
and
done.
that, yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
For taking that responsibility, because that's what you're talking about taking responsibility.
Correct.
If no one else has told you, I'm telling you, well done. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. And it was literally that day that I got hold of my publisher, and I said to her, right, I want the book out in the world by January 2021. What do I need to do? And she gave me this tightest deadline. And I didn't have to listen to my language. I chose to get up every day and every single day that was the end goal. My book in the world by January 2021. And that's all I focused on. And coming into 2021, there has been, it almost feels like I'm rebirthing myself, quite honestly, because I feel like 2020 really didn't happen for me anyway. And what I have decided to do from a brand new iteration of me, I have started working on a second book that is really and truly not enneagram related, but it's more around my own journey and teaching myself, right? What have I learned through 2020? And starting a podcast. I had hoped for it to be out this weekend. I've missed that mark. So it'll be out in April. And I'm working on online courses that people will be able to buy. And those will be out at the end of the year. And what I have realized is it's gotten me to this place is a sense of being kind to my Enneagram type. And that is something we all need, is to be kind to our own unhealthy version. You know, we don't give it a get out of jail free card every day, because otherwise, you know, we'd just be a truant child forever. But just being kind and giving myself the space of security. And whether that be, you know, I've got a delightful friend who's a lot younger than I am, and she's this crazy artist. And I can say to her, I'm giving you a tinkle now. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to placate me, tell me that life is going to be okay. I just want you to listen. and I'm giving myself 3 minutes. So being kind is to set up support for ourselves. And I think that is what I've done differently this year. It's just being kind.
And is that critical, do you think, for entrepreneurs to be kind to themselves and create the
Oh,
space?
bloody hell. Yes. Yes. So I think, no, I don't think, I know entrepreneurship is not for sissies, right? It's really not. I also do believe that more and more globally, people are going to go into the space of entrepreneurship, because it is my assessment that corporate as we know it is crumbling by the day. Corporate as we know it will not sustain the new way of the world. I can't see it happening. I'd love to be disproven around it, but I can't see it happening. So entrepreneurship is that, again, I want to say it's that paradox, it's that duality of, I don't know if it's tough, but it's like a firmness with self, holding accountability, holding responsibility, holding deliverable, and then equal opposite, being gentle, being kind, being generous of heart. And I think that is the interplay of entrepreneurship. There has to be play, there has to be give. You know, I often talk to my clients and say our engagement is a tight, loose way of engaging with each other. And for me, that's the duality of entrepreneurship.
You don't make it easy.
No.
Because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I understand that there's the rules and the regulations, and you need to do this and you need to do that in order to achieve. But then there's that softer space, but that softer space has never been part of business school, for lack of a better word. No one's ever said to you, well, you have to be considerate and you have to be kind. I mean, brilliant people like Richard Branderson, who says you have to treat your staff as the most important people in your world. Yet that was never part of the learnings that you get told when you're in business school. And this is what you're telling us as well, but not only to be kind to our staff, but to be kind to ourselves as well. So would that be your number one hack? Be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. You know, and not edit this out if it's not allowed, right? But without taking the piss, right? I mean, you can't, you know, get yourself a get out of jail free card every day. Oh, I really don't want to go to work today. Oh, I really don't want to cold call today. Oh, come on, that's a whole lot of BS, right? But be kind. You know, it's that whole thing for me of how do we as leaders, or how do we as an entrepreneur, if I don't know what kindness sounds like, feels like, tastes like, what the experience of it is for me, myself.
Both giving and receiving?
Absolutely. How do I know how to make that available to my clients? How do I do that? If I don't know, then I'm going to stand behind a pulpit and preach. And for the sake of what would I do that?
And then it doesn't create the space that you need for your clients to grow and develop, which means that each and every single entrepreneur needs to look at that and go, how do I create the right space for my client? What does my client want? And how do I create that? Because obviously I know that from a coaching point of view, it's slightly different to me creating the podcast space or someone creating a space that they're selling cars. I mean, obviously it's different, but to understand what that kindness is,
Absolutely.
That's
you know, I started writing a blog last night. I think that, well, maybe this morning is a better way of describing it. About 1:45 this morning, I couldn't sleep, and I've penned it as outside in. So I know that there's a lot of talk at the moment about starting with the end in mind, from a goal-oriented perspective. And actually, I was thinking about if we had to start from the outside in, so let's take kindness as an example, from the outside. So let's take your second-hand car salesman, right? Outside in, when somebody's coming to you buying a second-hand car, there will be certain criteria. And I think for most people would probably be security, safety of the car. You know, yes, depending on the personality type, there'll be an element of that has to be a bit of a flash. You know, somebody else would rather go for a Volvo or Toyota, you know, somebody else would go for a BMW or something. But outside in would be to listen for, to seek to understand what that person is looking for. Bring their need in, and how do you respond to that? Rather than, I'm here, I've got to make a comm by the end of the month, and I'm going to tell you what I think you need to hear.
So shouldn't that be the way business is done all the time? I know from my own point of view, I sit and I listen and I understand what is the requirement. And yes, I can throw all kinds of solutions at you, but those solutions are just what I've got in my stable of tools, which could or could not be of assistance to you. So it's about then not necessarily customizing it, because obviously, I mean, a car is a car is a car, but it's understanding, I want a red car, I want a Volvo, I want it to be an automatic, I want it to have a spare tire that works, or I don't know, whatever. I mean, I don't know enough about cars, but that's what I want, therefore that's what I need to be able to provide.
And I want to say, yes, it's great when I arrive and I say, this is what I want. The outside in is why? Why is a red car important? Why is a Volvo important? Why is an automatic important? Because, you know, I can remember for the longest time thinking that I would never, and I don't, I would never drive a BMW, because BMW drivers are prats, in my assessment, right? So I would never ever drive one. But, you know, but driving a red car, for my very, very, very first car that my ex-husband got me, he bought me, was an Alfa Giulietta Sports. And I couldn't drive, right? I crashed it. I couldn't drive, I crashed it. It wasn't red. I was devastated because it wasn't red. And he said to me after that I'd crashed it, why? I said, because red, Ferrari, red, it's got to be red. My second car was red. Would I ever have another red car? No, never.
Why not?
Because you know how many accidents by insurance stats red cars get into? Truly, I kid you not, right? But if you as the salesperson understand the why, you are eliciting the emotional story from your client, and that's when you tap into your toolbox.
Okay. Because
that's when you can
know that you want red.
Correct.
Now that I can start painting the picture, whether we end up selling you red is irrelevant.
Correct.
But the story makes sense. So then you start having the conversation around what makes sense for the client.
Correct.
Interesting. You see, and unfortunately that kind of hack means that it's going to be long-term learning. I mean, it's not like, I ask people for what is your hack? And they'll go, oh, well, that pen or that app or that, and then it's easy. You really are not making this easy for anyone, are you, usually?
No, but I am, because it's just simple stuff, right? It's just about being curious.
It is simple, and yes, it is. It creates a huge amount of curiosity and a huge amount of passion for learning and wanting to understand it. But it means that someone's going to have to actually put the effort in to figure it out.
For sure.
And that makes it not easy. But then again, being an entrepreneur is not easy. Wanting to work for yourself is not easy. And if you want to do it well, you need to put in the effort.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is one thing that I think there's a bit of a, I don't know, is it a fairy story? Perhaps, you know. that when you're an entrepreneur, you know, you can go play golf every day. And yeah, you can, for sure you can. But I know for myself that as an entrepreneur, I work far longer hours than my counterparts who are internal coaches in a big organization. I know that I do. My butt is permanently on the line. You know, I see every single opportunity as an opportunity. And I kind of want to say I'm constantly plugged into who I am and what I am in the world. Whereas I think we become a little lazy, and I apologize to all of your viewers and your listeners who are in corporate, but I do believe that to some degree in corporate we become a little lazy because we're protected. Whereas entrepreneurship, you've got to fire constantly.
So I'm going to put a bit of a spin in the works because I know that there are a lot of corporate people that put their heart and soul into their, I mean, look at yourself. Would you have ever called yourself lazy when you were working in corporate?
Never.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know that that's not the case, but at the same time, we do tend to, as corporate employees, you're a lot more lax because you know that you're going to get your salary at the end of the month. You've got 15 days leave. You can be sick. So entrepreneur, you don't have those. You don't have that.
Nope.
So, and I think that that's to me. So the laziness comes in with the fact that you don't have to panic or worry about all those things.
Sure. Although, to go back to my earlier sentiment, I do believe that corporate as we know it is not going to be around for very, very much longer as we know it. So therefore, that stability that I think a lot of people leaned into and took for granted from corporate, that might be wobbling.
Well, I think the last year has given a lot of people food for thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree.
It amazed me at how many people have become, as you were saying, have pivoted and have changed and have done some amazing things.
Yes.
So yeah, it has been really, but it has also shown corporate that they're not quite as necessary as
correct
thought that they were.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely.
So now you've got all this amazing stuff and this amazing product, and you are doing a what? How do you actually go out and sell yourself? What is your just not your sales pitch as such, but your tools to actually sell? How would you sell to someone? How do you cold call? Do you network? What do you do to?
So I'm going to say that was part of my realization in 2020 that I had up until then never marketed myself in 15 years.
Wow.
That I had been exceptionally fortunate just by word of mouth to have the most incredible clients on my books. So obviously 2020 took that all away. And I had to very quickly realize this thing called Marketing 101. And that was diabolically difficult for me to get involved in, because here I had the story about how appropriate or inappropriate it was or is for oneself to sell oneself. So that was a big mountain that I had to get over. This year, which I have loved, is I have gone more towards LinkedIn and Instagram. I've kind of fallen off Facebook. I don't know that that is the platform that I truly enjoy, but Instagram and LinkedIn I'm loving. And I'm literally leveraging off that. I have started creating amazing networks on LinkedIn. Selling myself, and I have to say, is still quite difficult for me. It really and truly is. So what I do now is I will connect with a person and create more of a conversation first. And down the line, then go in and offer value. So on my LinkedIn, I'm putting excerpts on my book. And on Instagram, I do that. And I write a lot of blogs, and on Medium. So I'm affording value first before making the request as to, could we have a structured conversation around what I do?
Okay, I love that.
So,
But do you think that that has a lot to do with your confidence, as because I know that you're exceptionally able to do what you do, but does confidence have a, I mean, like, I look at car salesmen again, I mean, they seem to just like ooze this, I can sell anything, ice to an Eskimo type thing. And then you get some people that go, well, I have this service, and I do you, don't you, do you? And I'm not a salesperson. I profess that I cannot sell, but that's why I network, because
right.
once I've connected with you, and then we can have a coffee, and then we can chat.
Yes.
Oh yes, this is what I do, by the way. You know, but
yes,
if you need it or don't, whatever.
yes. So, I remember reading an article at some point last year around how to leverage of what feels most comfortable for you to connect. So, my children will often say to me, and they still would prefer not to go out with me, because they say that I have a sticky on my forehead that says, speak to me. The more random, the better, right? Because I'll be in the queue and somebody in front of me or behind me will strike up a conversation, right? And the next minute, yes, I'm doing that thing. I'm exchanging business cards. Thank you, Pam, for my business cards. But it's random. So I find it really easy to engage with people, to speak with people when it is not front and center that I'm selling me. So, that for me is the platform. Leverage off, so you've said it as well. You can engage at a networking event because you enjoy chatting, right? Conversing with people. So that for me is the know who you are first and foremost. Know what you offer as a secondary. Because really we engage from such a limbic perspective. I connect with you unconsciously from a limbic response. Either I feel like I can physically move in or my body moves away.
Yeah.
Right? So if my body is moving away and you're coming full on with your sales pitch, I'm moving exactly, right? Whereas if we're just chatting and I'm moving forward, I would want to chat with you again at the next networking event. So again, I come back to that humanness thing, that being real thing. Really and truly, that for me, this being real, the being human, yes, we're all calling it being authentic, right? But for me, it's even can't stand it, right? Can't stand it. Like hashtag. So for me, just be real, damn it. Because the more real you are, the more I can connect with you. And that, in my assessment, that realness, that humanness, that ability to be who I am, regardless of where I am, that is our new economy. That for me is the thing that will allow me, and I'm going to put it in trade terms, I will want to buy more of you. So whether that is, hi, I met you at whatever, how about a coffee? I mean, I might still not be buying any of Print Logic's offerings, but I'm buying of your time. I'll pay for a coffee. And it might only be in the fourth coffee.
But that then boils down to traditional marketing 101. You need to connect with people up to 10 times before they will buy. So therefore, and whereas in the old days, it was you had to actually speak to them that many times.
Yes.
And now it's social media and a newsletter.
Correct.
And this and that.
Correct.
But the interaction, that human interaction, as you say, and yes, most of it's on Zoom these days, so it's really sad.
Sure.
But you can have human interaction with people internationally that you could never do.
Correct.
So those are the pros and the cons all rolled into one.
Yeah.
But buying having a virtual coffee with you is way more productive for either of us from a sales point of view, because you get,
correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I've wrapped it all up with you. I just get so excited.
So there we have it.
Juanene, it's absolutely fantastic. I have to ask you this: failures, other than feeling like you sold your soul to the devil, and you've had 15 years of going through the coaching and the wobble last year, what would be your greatest failure? Or your worst failure? Sorry, not great, worst failure, biggest. And
how philosophical am I allowed to be?
As philosophical as you need to be.
Okay.
This is your story, remember? Your story, not mine.
So I know that one of my biggest failures has been my stubbornness, right? I'm exceptionally stubborn. I really and truly am, to my own detriment. And, you know, the first chapter in my book, and actually the reason that I wrote my book and the dedication in my book is to my late mum. And my failure there was the inability to, one, let her know that she had never told me that she loved me. And two, to tell her that I loved her. So for the longest time, I mean, she died 8 years ago now, without her ever telling me that she loved me. And it is what it is, right? But I was so stubborn that I never engaged in that conversation. And the pride that kept me stuck there is a huge failure for me. So I have got to be so mindful of my stubbornness, because bloody hell, I can, you know, cut my nose off to spite my face because I am so stubborn. That is a big failure of mine, that I have to constantly, when I'm, I shut off, right? I'm doing this because somebody once said to me, it's like you take down this solid sheet of impenetrable steel, and then nobody can get to you. And that is that pride, that is that stubbornness. And truly, I think that is one of my biggest failures in life, is that stubbornness.
Does it still impact your life? Because I listen, and I'm not talking about necessarily the fact that your mom, not that specific instance, but stubbornness as a rule. Do you still catch yourself doing that?
I mean, recently, as like last year, April, there was another incident where I literally, I just disconnect. That's it. It's done. It's finished. Not engaging anymore. So I have to sit with myself and really and truly explore what lies beneath this. And 9 times out of 10, it's that child having a tantrum. I don't feel like I've been seen. I don't feel like I've been heard. I don't feel like anybody loves me. You know, I'm playing in the sandpit on my own. The other kids have left me. And it's about, okay, Juanene, is that really true? Is it true? And if I'm still hell-bent on holding on to this thing about, yes, it's true, then, okay, Juanene, if it is true, what are you willing to do about it? And, you know, that's when it lives totally in my court. What are you willing to do about it?
Responsibility for.
Correct.
And have you been able to push through the big metal sheet that falls flat?
So of the 3 relationships, yes, 1. And it is literally biting the elephant titbit by titbit for the other two. But yes.
But it shows that it's possible for anyone.
Oh, it is definitely. Oh, I mean, failure is just there to teach me. You know, that's all it is. Failure is just highlighting my own story, my small story about myself. That's all failure is. Failure is a gorgeous teacher. It really is. I mean, she has the most wicked sense of humor, right? But
man,
yeah.
yeah.
Failure can only be a woman. That's all I can say.
Absolutely, absolutely. So taking everything that you've learned over the last 15 years, from going corporate into entrepreneurial coaching, and also having so many people that you are coaching, I mean, you must learn so much. What is the advice that you would give to someone who's looking at going out on their own?
Oh, the first thing that comes to mind is you've got to have a sense that this thing is going to delight you. You know, I kind of want to say we all have had a heart flutter. So with a significant other, right? And this thing that you're going to do has got to delight you to the same kind of extent. You're wanting to be with it, share in it, grow with it, laugh with it, cry with it, and you've got to be willing to put your all in it. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, all of that. Then they're very pragmatic things, you know. For me, if you're jumping from corporate into your own space, have a backup plan, and that backup plan might be, you know, 6 months of salary in the bank kind of thing, right? Engage with as many people as you can in a myriad of different environs, but who all share with the commonality of being an entrepreneur. Ask them what works. Ask them what doesn't work.
Watch the I Will podcast.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. And I think it's just about, I don't know, being brave, right? And remember to tell yourself the great job that you're doing. Show up every day. And if today is not such a great day, it's okay. Show up again tomorrow. And the one thing that has truly, truly, truly kept me going is the most amazing circle of girlfriends. They're not in my world. Some of them aren't entrepreneurial at all, so have little understanding of my world. Most of them are in very long-term relationships, so they don't know what it's like being a single mom. So their worlds are very, very different to mine, and they are absolute pillars of strength for me.
Would they be, are they, would they be just from a personal point of view or from a business point of view? Because although, as you say, they all come from different worlds, are you able to bounce business ideas off of them, thought processes, personal stuff? Because obviously they're personal friends, not business.
Sure. So they definitely serve the both.
Okay.
Right. So I will often go to the person who is in corporate with a crazy, wacky, damn idea. And I say to her, okay, I'm thinking about doing this. From your antiquated perspective, what do you think? Right. And she will give me great, great input and advice that I would never even have thought about from a corporate lens. So that for me is almost a have to have when you go solo. Because here's the thing, and I see it so often, and especially in the startup world that I'm working with at the moment, where a husband and a wife or a sibling or, you know, somebody who's known one another for a really long time have now got funding and going into a startup. There's got to be a divide between that which you do in the office and when you come home. So for me, going into the place of entrepreneurship, it's really tough if everything about you bleeds into your home space as well, because then it's just absolute one minefield, right? Then what are the conversations about outside what it is that you do? So for me, having that network, that support, somebody described it to me the other day and said, "Oh, Jay, it's just like you have a board of directors." And really and truly, that's what it is, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say earlier, is that because you had your dinner table that you were talking about. So it's the people around your dinner table, or it's the people in your tribe, or
Correct.
people in your boardroom.
Yes.
And being able to actually go without actually giving them titles, but knowing this is the person that I speak to about the logical stuff. This is the person I speak to about the soft, gooey, emotional stuff. And this is the one I go and cry on. That kind of
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay.
Because
so
to a degree, yes. Because to a degree, you would have had that in corporate, right? So whether it be your team or your line manager or your peers, colleagues, you would have had those sounding boards. So for me, that is such a big support. Build up that tribe again, build up that board of directors again, because you will tap into them.
No, I love the fact that you've pointed it out for people that have or who are working with their spouses or people that are working with their siblings. Because you're right, to be able to draw that line as to this is what we talk about here and this is what we talk about there. And you have to. So the other stuff, the emotional stuff or the logical stuff, you need to share it with others as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. How can people get hold of you?
Oh, easy peasy. Well, Facebook or Instagram as Juanene Frydman, my website, juanenefrydman.com, and LinkedIn, because I am seriously thinking about going back to my maiden surname. I am there as Juanene Christopherly Frydman.
Okay, excellent. And then you have your blog?
And yes, I have my blog, which is under my name. And there's my
going live next week, right?
Yes. So that will, and I have to say, the glitch is, what am I going to call it?
I'll have a conversation with you.
But yes, it's either going to be something like Call Me Jay or something along that line. But yes, that'll be out. And then obviously there's my book in the world.
Yes, of course. Don't forget the book, which I know is available on Takealot because I've ordered it, although there's a 5-6-day delivery, so I'll only have it on my next. I was hoping to have it today so that you could visually, virtually sign it, but don't worry. I'll see you soon and I'll make you sign it.
Indeed. And it's also available at Exclusive Books. And I know in your side of the world, it's available. I think it's Wordsworth. Do you have a Wordsworth?
We do have a Wordsworth.
Yes, I think it's available at a couple of Wordsworths. And it's on Amazon.
Excellent.
So it's at a couple of places, yes.
Lovely. So definitely, I'm looking forward to being able to read that. I have been watching your blogs and all the rest. Juanene, thank you so much for. Final question. Would you ever go back to employment?
What? Never.
Just double checking. I wanted to make sure if you'd really sold your soul or not.
Never. I just love, never. Although people would say to me, Juanene, never ever say never, right? But I cannot see myself going back into formal corporate employment. No, I can't. Excellent. I'm too much of a rebel, for heaven's sake.
No, and I can't imagine you ever fitting in a box again, square peg in a round hole.
I'd be fired on the first day.
Unless it's there's always that.
Well, there's always that, right?
Juanene, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you
so much for sharing all the amazing wealth of knowledge that you have. And
thank you.
We'll chat soon.
We will indeed. And thank you so much for the invite. It was gorgeous to see you again.
Yes.
Bye now. Bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview and that you feel inspired to take your business to the next level. Please subscribe for more, connect with me and the community online at I Work For Me, and head over to the website for interesting reads and resources. If you like, you can support the team by buying them a coffee. Until next time, keep up the grind.